Hi. I figured I'd start on a lower key today. It's episode 107 of Scar Bears. I'm Chris DT Gordon. As always, thank you so much for being here with me. Man, it's such a force to try to be calmer. I have this energy and I can't rein it in. I'm sorry, folks. I'm so happy that you're here. And I'm happy that Nate and Britton are here to help me out, make this lovely mess even lovelier. And if you want them to work on your projects, you can reach out to them at Nate Barron. Well, folks, I'm just going to get right into it. My new friend and I were at a speaking convention of sorts, a speaking workshop as we're recording this a couple of days ago, and we're just filled to the brim with speaker energy. So Katrina Breau, what's up, bro? How are you doing today?
Doing well. Looking forward to the adventure we're going to take on today.
Exactly. And for those who are not aware, it's already been an adventure. So as I said, Katrina, we were joined together in a speaking workshop, and usually those are attended by speakers, and we speakers are like snowflakes. We have our own unique stories, and though they might bring us together to form a giant snowball of inspiration and motivation, we all have our own journeys that brought us to that giant snowball. So why don't you let us know about your journey, Katrina?
Certainly. So my journey is kind of like a lasagna of all kinds of traumas and healing and growth and lessons along the way. A little bit about me as a young child, I have grew up with extreme trauma in my home. By the time I was 11 years old, my family situation was crumbling. My parents had been married and divorced 4 times each, with lots of traumas in between all of that. Removed by police protection, put into the foster care system, and a whole other areas of issues there. But while I was going through this whole journey, I had another issue, which was while in school, I was one of the only children in the area that lived with epilepsy. And at the time in school, the school system was really having struggles with allowing me to participate. In my grade 3 class, the parents did a petition to have my desk removed to the back of the room so that the other children would not catch epilepsy from me. You know, if Katrina sneezes, you might catch the epilepsy. And so, of course,
really quick. Now you lived when at this time, or where at this time?
This was just out in the Cranbrook, BC, in British Columbia at that time. And at that time, the situation for me was I just wanted to fit in. And unfortunately, there was a lot of fear back in the early 70s because they just didn't have the knowledge to understand back then. And I don't blame any of them. It's just that the fear overtook the lack of knowledge that they had.
Yeah, so it's not like this was 20 years later and not in the 90s when the internet was starting to come around. Knowledge was harder to come by.
Yeah, and you're in a small town. You know, and so, you know, I used to have complications with even playing outside where, you know, parents would say, you know, you can't ride a bike because you have epilepsy. You can't go swimming because you have epilepsy, and you can't. And all of these things, not only with all of the negative mental health traumas that sort of layered in from not only the broken foundation I was growing up in, but also the self-worth and, you know, labeling and sort of the scarlet letter from all of this that impacted me to really swirl the drain of depression in the mental health end, as well as not really strengthen that personal desire to you know, make connections. And along that journey through my childhood, as I was moving continuously as well, because with all my parents' relationships, we also, you know, uphealed and relocated all over the place. And with all of these marriages and divorces, I had, you know, siblings all over the globe in the process of this, and lots of just areas that we needed to overcome. And for me, it was very hard to do so, because by the time I reached my teenage years in a group home in the foster system, in high school, my foster parent basically went down to the school board and said, listen, you owe this girl an education. Here she is in high school with maybe a grade 3 level of reading. And all the time you had been moving her along, but not letting her really participate in the activities of the class to grow. And so then I got to one-on-one teaching to kind of bring me around, and also to really lift away the layers of belief that I had placed on myself, that all of these things that I couldn't do, I really learned that I was able to do. I just didn't have the right tools at that time. And then when I was given the tools, I understand that I really could read and I really could do this. Although I had epilepsy and dyslexia and, mental health traumas of extreme adverse childhood experiences, I didn't have to choose to let that overcome my life. And I really became almost like the type A personality of wanting to prove everybody wrong, of all of the belief about myself and what society's belief was for someone like me. And in that type A personality kind of went gung-ho and, off to post-secondary, absorbing all of these things because I knew that I could do this. And, down the road, getting married, my husband and I were both in the military and overseas, and working in all kinds of different stages that also brought us to areas where we had to look at the positive areas, and growing up with epilepsy, I was on all levels of medication, the side effects of all of these medication that also impacted my cognitive ability to focus, as well as many different side effects that would contribute complications for me as well.
Wow.
And, there was lots of different things as a child, to deal with,
Yes.
and
I want to go back a little bit to when you finally received that one-on-one education with the teacher. What grade were you?
I was in grade 11.
Grade 11. So,
for the
and
grade
so
3 education.
Okay, so the education system in Canada is similar to the United States, where that is a year before graduation, correct?
A year before graduation, and I was slipping through the cracks. And I want to say, in hindsight, it was my fault, because I was also good at kind of putting the face on and the mask to say everything's coming up roses. But in the end, it was a mask and covering up the brokenness, because a lot of the times I didn't want to bring those pieces there. For example, one of my mom's marriages, the new husband that she had didn't really like the idea of even having a child, so I was shipped to go live with my family in England.
Oh,
and
wow.
instead of being there, which again, it's all kinds of levels of trauma. And while I was living over there, her marriage fell apart again, and it was always my fault. And even though I'm across the Atlantic, and although those are the cases and beliefs at that time as a child, and you kind of take in those beliefs, it wasn't the reality, and understanding those traumas as well, because my biological mother and father, when they had me, I was a product of the two of them. After their marriages had fallen apart as well, and they got together, and both of them had children from previous marriages. And my mom, when she got together with my father, had to emigrate to Canada because my dad was coming to run with a pulp mill in British Columbia. But in the process of doing that, the laws in England made my mom leave her 2-year-old son behind. She was not allowed to bring him across the Atlantic. So as an adult, I look back at the traumas my mom was dealing with when she came into Canada, and she left, like when you're in London, in a busy town, to a middle of nowhere in the woods town, in the Rockies kind of thing. It was a very different lifestyle and shock factor for her, as well as the emotions of not having her child. And then, she was okay with me, but then when she got pregnant again and had another son, she had real emotional traumas for even holding that son when she had left one behind. And so not only was there lots of emotional issues, my father was involved with a major catastrophe of one of the largest plane crashes in the area for 747, where it broke in half, engulfed in flames, some bodies came out and what have you. And he had lots of different stuff like that he was dealing with no post-traumatic stress. as well as his emotions from leaving his family. So my parents were both broken pieces as well. And so even though I was, as a young kid, my dad would hug me. And then when he would go to work and experience extreme traumas, he'd come back and he wouldn't hug me. And I was like, what did I do wrong? But really, I didn't do anything wrong. It was just the emotions that he was dealing with having to take bodies from a plane that would, collapse in him, and different issues that I, as a young child, did not see or understand.
Yeah. And I feel for your family, because that just for one of their traumas is enough to really hold someone back emotionally. But all those different situations and pieces coming together and breaking apart, and I don't want to even try to equate it with something, because I don't know what would be the equal.
Yeah, but the good thing about it, though, is, today as an adult, I have been able to reconnect with my parents and really have great relationships with both my mother and father and all of the siblings across the globe as well, because I chose to reconnect and really grow from, everything from, witnessing everything from alcoholism to all levels of brokenness, but to understand and see from a whole new perspective as an adult that has gone through your own trauma, to look in and have a better clarity of what the situation was than just the emotions of when you were a young kid.
When did you start making those realizations? Because, as I said before, you had that one-on-one instruction in grade 11, and then you graduated and then went to the military. It seems like there was a lot of movement still within yourself, but a lot of that inward growth it's sometimes comes at a point where there's a bit of stasis.
Absolutely. So because all of the years where, my parents were married and divorced and all kinds of different undercurrents in between, there were different things for me. Like, for example, when I was about 14 years old, the system believed, because I was dealing with so much emotion as a child, they decided to put me in a psychiatric ward with adult men and then me in there as a young kid, which in hindsight, I would not have done it. It was more of like, I should have probably gone to like a counselor or a psychiatrist or something as a kid, rather than to be placed in a hospital psychiatric ward as a young child. But
with all men, mind you.
Yeah, and it's, it was very, very different. But it's just those types of things that, when I look back, it's just that the little town that we lived in didn't always have the tools in their toolbox to do things the way that we would handle it today.
Yes.
And so I understand that, but all of those little chips of broken pieces became part of my puzzle, and also gave me the tools and methods to really grow. When I transitioned into a group home for foster care, I became almost like the little social worker for all the other kids that were coming there from extreme traumas as well, because this was a group home that was sort of a safety net for kids that were either going in and out of prison or in and out of extreme traumas. And so, there'd be all kinds of things of emotions that sometimes, looking back, it was like I had the wisdom of a much older person because of all of my experiences that I had been through, to be able to sit and offer almost like peer counseling to the other kids that were in the situations as well.
I'm someone who, finds the blessing in uncommon things, and that, I'm so thankful that you're able to find that blessing, because I don't want to say a weaker person, but a different person may have looked at that situation, looked at your situation, and taken a different tact. But the ability to not only use it for a tool, to help yourself, but use it as a tool to help others is remarkable.
Yeah, and the foster care system wasn't always safe for me as well. There was some foster homes that were very abusive, and other ones that weren't. But for example, in one of the abusive level homes, I jumped out of a second-story window to free myself, and then ran away to go back to the psychiatric ward where I knew it would be safer for me.
Oh,
which is
wow.
which is
Yeah,
kind of really crazy when you think about a kid doing that.
crazy in more than one sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And same with when I was living at home with my mom with different husbands that she had. Sometimes my situation was where I would have so much fear of the alcoholism and the aggression in that environment that I would sneak out of the house to go and sleep sometimes in a graveyard, where I would find myself safer than in the home environment because of the
Wow.
traumas taking place. But all of these things layered towards a group home that really took me in and embraced me to allow me to grow and transition, which, it came like a lottery. Sometimes you get this, sometimes you don't. And I had that blessing occur, which was wonderful. And then, and I had lots of crazy experiences, in my later teens. I was, raped, I had an abortion, all kinds of different layers of things that had occurred to me. But even though all of these traumas that had hit me, you have to make a decision on the diverse level of traumas and all of the automatic negative thoughts that come from all of these experiences, as you either have to choose to embrace that and become the victim mentality, which, many times I did. And and embrace that victim mentality, but I had to come to decide that it was time for me to grow up and become who I wanted to be.
And so, first of all, I applaud you for doing that, because it is so easy to, again, to develop that victim mentality, because it takes, when you do that, it takes not just the blame, but the responsibility off of you to make the change. But I applaud you. I'm so happy that you did not take that mentality. You took the victor or the survivor mentality. So what was your first step to not only helping yourself survive, but realizing I can use this to help others, besides being the peer counselor in the foster home or the psychiatric ward?
Yeah. So eventually, while I was a teen in that stage, I also went into, Army cadets and lots of different programs to really give me that self-confidence along the path as well. And when I eventually met my husband, he was in the military as a plane crash investigator and firefighter. And then we were transferred from the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island to Germany. And we went to go live in Germany for 5.5 years. And again, that became an issue for me at the beginning because I wasn't a Canadian citizen. So I was British and I had to become a Canadian citizen to be able to go on the Canadian Forces Base. But then being over there, it was very, very different than what we were used to in society. And I became pregnant. And it was interesting because the medical system had a whole different version of what they accepted for me. So being a pregnant person on the military base, they were not okay with me being pregnant on a military base as a person living with epilepsy. Because of all of the medications I had been on in my life, they were concerned about the impact of this child, and that because of all of this, medication X, Y, Z, and all of these different kinds, you really shouldn't be pregnant because this has been in your system. You're going to be having a child with severe disabilities because of all of this in your system. And they had a real fear of bringing a special needs child in to the environment on a military base. And for me, I was like, you know what? Along my teenage years, I also embraced supporting other children with all levels of disability as as a peer support for them in summer recreation programs. And I said to them, with the training that I had working in physiotherapy and cerebral palsy children at that time, I'm okay with if God's bringing me a special needs child, I can live with that. But in the process of where they wanted me to abort my child at 5.5 months pregnant, I chose to keep the child. And she ended up being perfectly fine with no complications. And it's just, choosing to say that, no matter what the system says about the stage of wherever you are, listen to what's right for you. And that's what I had to do. And then while on the base there, I continued to embrace courses because that was me. I became like the student, absorbing as much material as I could. And while in Canada, I was working doing physiotherapy with cerebral palsy children. And then when I went to the military base, I took a course in management and accounting and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to the base and said to them, listen, I'm going to be here for over 5 years. What kind of job can you see me doing? And this is where I've been working. I'm a new mom with this background. And they said, well, you know what, we really think you would fit well in NATO security for policing and a security officer for NATO. And I'm like, okay, physiotherapy, you see this connection? Okay,
new
bring
baby,
it on.
NATO, yeah, makes sense.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just that where I was and what was available, I had to fit into these markets. And as my husband and I traveled all over the place with the military, we had to adjust to the different towns and what was available to sort of tweak my qualifications around that. And then when I came back from Germany back into Canada, I said to my husband, I didn't want to have another child until we could go to number one, an English-speaking doctor, and number two, someone who understood a little bit more about epilepsy, and that I wanted to be asking for a transition to a major town when we came back into Canada. So I went for Edmonton, where they would have a specialist there that would understand my conditions as well. And then I was probably pregnant the night we flew in and landed in Canada, and then had a second child here in Canada, and that was wonderful for us as well. But then I decided, how do I take the care that I love for people and the security that I had with what I had learned in working with NATO and blend that? And so when I came back, I worked for VIP protection for like the legislative building and mentoring in the Correctional Service Canada programs and things like that. But really choosing to continue to say to my husband, the other main reason I wanted to be in a big town is that I could continue to embrace my desire to gain education and knowledge through post-secondary options. And I continue to do that. And not only to gain education for myself, but to also continue to be a lay teacher and communicator within our community as well. And so, I was the first aid instructor in the community, and then, teaching everything from WHMIS, TDG, and all of that kind of stuff. And then, I did many different things, from car sales to, working in high offices in accounting and finance, and just whatever was available wherever we were living to be able to take that on.
Wow.
And along those journeys, I learned lots and had lots of tools in my toolbox. And then I moved from teaching first aid for almost 10 years and to tweaking into doing more of the hands-on in the nursing direction. And then I switched over into geriatrics and palliative care, and really being there for people in caring in another whole different direction, both on home care as well as in facility care. And, the unfortunate thing at that time was I was really not strong in standing up for my own boundaries. And I allowed the systems that I was in to really impact me. One of those examples was when you were working in geriatric care, many times you'd work an 8-hour shift, but sometimes they would say you need to stay for a double shift and you'd be working 16 hours.
Oh.
And I would say, it's okay once in a while, like if Chris couldn't show up because of a car accident or whatever, I could do that. But those once in a whiles became all the time. And again, in hindsight, that was my fault for not stepping up for myself and saying, no, I can't do this. But what I would do is they would say to us things like, none of you get to go home until one of you steps up and does a double shift. And I would say, well, Chris, you go home because you have a 2-year-old and I have teens. I'll just give them a call and they'll make their own dinner. And, it's okay. We can handle this. But along that path of continuing to do for other people, I was always, pouring from my own cup that was running out. Yeah. And, not taking care of myself and always putting my own needs on the back burner. And that eventually caught up with me and again caused more complications in my own health, from not eating properly, not sleeping properly, from working these extreme shifts. And when you're living with neurological complications like epilepsy, this is not a good formula. Yeah. and for me, what ended up happening is I went into a severe grand mal seizure, where I went cyanotic, which is where you stop breathing and go all blue in color, and basically due to the lack of oxygen, have complications then occur in the brain as well. and, taken to the hospital for ambulance and what have you, having to be monitored and brought back around and what have you. Because when you're not breathing for a period of time, legally, that's a complication for you.
Yeah.
When I survived this, it really was an aha moment where, the money wasn't always worth it. And so many times, even when my kids were young, they're in their 30s now, but when my kids were younger, I would, rush to work, to rush back and hurry up and eat supper and hurry up and go to tonight's activities and hurry up and do this and this, and stuck on that revolving rush syndrome. But sometimes we need to slow down. And unfortunately, hitting a brick wall like a major life trauma in a medical situation did that for me. And my employers at the time, unfortunately, said, well, why don't you just take a week or two off and come back? And it really, again, laid the importance of self-care. And when that happened to me, even though I was in the medical system within geriatric and palliative care and trying to help as much as I could, I realized the brokenness of the system and how it was impacting my own journey and my own life and my own health and my family's. And so I switched gears, and again, with my desire to absorb more education all the time. And I went first to become a fitness trainer because I thought that'll do it. I'll get myself back into health and this will be the answer for me. But I realized that was not what I wanted to do. And I switched gears into nutrition. And then with nutrition, I realized again, I needed more information. And every time I took a different certification and qualification, I found another area I wanted to be in. But I didn't just want to be the regular nutritionist and dietitian to do, the government food guide. I wanted to look at specific areas that I was personally dealing with. When you're dealing with neurology and brain health and the impacts when you're dealing on medications and the side effects of medications, and also in the mental health and the depression ends of things, and really understanding the biochemistry of nutrients of food and how that works for assisting your mood, your energy level, and really impacting the specifics of your health journey. And that wasn't about government regulations.
No.
And so I went into that direction and really just loved what I was doing. I was, hi, my name's Katrina. I was addicted to courses and programs. And, and that's what I did.
Katrina.
And that's what I did. I became, where I was continually taking a new qualification or whatever. I just felt that I needed more. I was always needing more, but really I had already had enough. And many people kept saying to me, well, when are you going to, share some of this information? And I felt very hesitant because I didn't want to get, so busy that I stuck up into like a 18-hour day again. So yes. I was like, really, I want to say cautious on how I was going to share this. And then I ended up where I, started my own business doing a neurological nutrition for brain health areas, and really took a look at specializing in these areas, whether you lived with epilepsy or dealing with depression or MS and things like that, and really taking a look at the ways to gain and utilize the power of your grocery cart. And by doing that, this is one area that I just loved, but, and many times unfortunately, I felt the desire of doing more for others as well. I was always involved with the nonprofit sector, both not only in church, but in the nonprofit world. Presently, I am the voice of Albertans with Disabilities president, as well as the Edmonton Epilepsy Association and many other different organizations for the Rural Mental Health Project for mental health in those small areas. And in one second here, Ken, can you just be quiet there? I'm on a podcast here right now. And so my husband just walked in from up north. But so in these situations, for me, I had to really, embrace my own health journey and step away sometimes from what the regular system was offering. And with my epilepsy, I was placed on more and more medications with all kinds of levels of severe reactions on my skin internally as well. And when I would be in a rash covering my whole body with medications, they would say to me, okay, well, then you just go to the dermatologist and you're going to get this medication here to offset what this medication's doing. And so I would go into the pharmacy, they give me this prescription, and I would walk in and I would say, okay, listen, where would you like me to put this cream? And I'd strip off and show how the rash was like from head to toe all over me, with extreme, reds and blacks. And for those of you aware, this is like Stephen Johnson syndrome all over the skin, and also, complications down the esophagus and what have you. And I just realized that, after all of these medication levels and the different specialists that were providing all of this, I was done with the chemistry experiment. It was like, thank you so much, but I'm looking for alternative options. And so with those alternative options, again, I would continue to look at ways to utilize the nutrition for dealing with what had happened to me. And, and I loved doing that. But when COVID came, it also caused me to then shut my business down for the front end of it, and do more online like this. But I also felt the calling and desire with the tools that I had from decades of working in the front lines of geriatric and palliative care, that I needed to go back as well and put my tools and my experience where it was actually needed at that time. And so I went back to the front lines of COVID, and and this was also coming off of situations where, it wasn't necessarily the healthiest environment for me to step into, and I ended up 8 months in, lots of complications with that front line. Normally in every year we would have 3 to 4 people pass away from the normal flus that would occur, but here we were having like 25 people pass away at a time with all kinds of complications, and these and then not having the equipment we needed on the front line was also causing extreme stress for those of us that were working there, also working crazy hours and being stretched so thin, to the point where these emotions of dealing with all of this frontline trauma was also affecting all of us. And in the process of that, we were then also coming to a point where we were, snapping at each other from the stresses, taking care of, and the bullying undercurrents that were taking place with the frontline workers that were there. And, that all affected us. And again, living with epilepsy and the high stresses, as the stress load would build, my seizure thresholds would then also be affected by this. Yeah. And I'd end up having complications for a seizure again.
Oh, wow.
And, and then, I would go on short-term and long-term disability. And then while on short-term and long-term disability, I explained to the specialist that I didn't want more medications. I didn't want more of this. I wanted to utilize the Charlie Foundation's method, which is also looking at the ways of utilizing the original ketogenic diet, not what you see in all of the new in thing, but the medical versions. There's 9 different medical versions of the ketogenic diet specifically for dealing with neurological conditions.
No, Charlie, one second. Yeah. Charlie diet, is that so
this is the Charlie Foundation, okay, which Charlie is Foundation. The Charlie Foundation is an organization that assists people with professional dietitians that are trained in neurology to deal with epilepsies and seizures.
Okay.
And how to utilize the food and the power of your grocery cart, and understanding sort of the balance of different nutrients and how that crosses the blood-brain barrier to control different levels of seizure activities as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Because I had never heard of that foundation before. So that was very helpful.
And so that's out of the US. And because I didn't have the tools here in Canada to utilize. And so I wanted to get some of the information from the US as well. And so that's what I was doing. And if you're over in Europe, the connection there is the Matthew Foundation as well. And so there's a variety of different options for you.
So like a bunch of guys got together and said, okay, I'll take North America, you take Europe. And so, a bunch of guys just, the Bill Foundation.
And it's basically like all of us that have lived these journeys. Like for me, I've lived with epilepsy for over, almost 55 years going forward with it. But it's along that way, we gain unique tools when you're living with these types of challenges. Yes. Whether it's my epilepsy, when I had lack of oxygen, it also caused frontal lobe division scarring for me, and a brain tumor on my brainstem, and many other complications, as well as my dyslexia from when I was younger and what have you. But all of these things together, those of us that actually live and walk these journeys have experience in our toolbox to pass on to people that have just been diagnosed today.
Yes.
And same with, understanding the issues of COVID and the frontline workers burnout and all of these things that are taking place, that many times it's just where we as a society need to step forward and support each other. When you think of when you and I were kids, we all knew all the neighbors and would run around and play it outside and have fun when we were kids back, in the, early 70s and things like that. But today, kids don't know their neighbors. Many times our society has them all boxed in homes where we just don't get that personal connection anymore. And sometimes we just need to learn to reach out and embrace people. And with the Rural Mental Health Project that I'm involved with across Alberta, we want to look at raising the mental health awareness. Even if you're in a small little town, different methods that we can all help each other to raise that mental health level. And when all of us working together, even just if you're checking on a friend or a neighbor or a senior on your cul-de-sac to see how they're doing. Sometimes we just need to do that.
I wholeheartedly believe that callback to community is huge. And even though it is a lot of times technology that keeps us isolated, we can also use it to come together, as we did this past weekend as we're recording this. So how is your, give me one example of how your foundation achieves that goal of reaching out to people?
Sure. So when you look at a town, any little small town that you're in, many of us have different populations of volunteers that are out there, or the municipal government of that little town, and have different programs and nonprofits that are out there. But many people are falling through the cracks. And so that could be something as simple as the seniors that in times like with the isolation issues and what have you, aren't really getting out to the programs that they would have normally to make that socialization. And when you have seniors that are at home by themselves and don't have that socialization connection, that can really impact their mental health, to then having the swirling drain of depression and more complications for them as well. Yes. And then same with the teens today that are now doing majority of everything via computer, also are missing out on that connection with other kids, just to, let them know that, sometimes you just need a warm fuzzy hug. Because when I think about when I was a teen and the traumas and family dynamics within my home, I needed those friends outside of that home to really give me that mental support. And in times like this, when you're just on computer and cannot escape that sort of being locked in the home, if there's a family trauma occurring as well. Mm-hmm. Another area that I do a lot of is I regularly write for different magazines, like the divorce magazines for Canada and things like that, where I share about what it was like to be a child. When you are in the process of a divorce, basically when that separation happens, the finances change in the home too. And when the finances change, so does the quality of the nutrients of food. And then on top of that, that also impacts the mental health and the emotions of the whole dynamics of that, and looking at ways that we can help and, bring forward opportunities for families to get together and share, have in your little town, we can all share stories, in your local newspaper of things that you did to create a warm fuzzy for the community. Mm-hmm. And that could be something as simple as, carrying groceries, or, shoveling the snow for somebody, or small little things that you can do to check on people just to see how they're doing. You have a busy single mom with 5 kids or whatever that just needs a break today, then, what if you could step in to give some of that assistance so that she could, take that extra hour nap or whatever, and just give those little warm fuzzies to each other. And especially in small towns that don't have necessarily the professionals there to be able to deal with whatever mental health traumas are there, we also need to look at, as adults that have dealt with different things, to be peer supports for other, whether you're supporting each other as a new single mom, or you are supporting teens because you yourself had experienced teens, to give motivation to other teens, or when you even look at things like living with disabilities and challenges of all kinds. Kids love to hear stories, and teens love to hear stories, or people that are just diagnosed with a condition love to hear stories of people who have lived this journey and can realize how to step outside of that victim mentality as well.
That is huge, because yes, when someone else sees that, hey, you made it, and you're able to affect the community in a positive way, that gives them hope that they can do the same.
I
So
mean,
that is beautiful.
yeah, and it's just like
Katrina,
you saw.
good.
Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just going to say, like, even watching the Olympics this week, and you see the snowboarder there that was in cancer treatment for 4 years and had to give up everything, but then has got back and survived the seriousness of his cancer to go back and come back towards a gold medal and winning a gold medal again after going through such a severe trauma. And although he had all of these levels of mental health and physical traumas in his life and his medical condition, he said, you know what, that was my dream, and I'm going back to achieve it. And many of us, when we have these conditions, no matter what the condition is, we have to sit back and say, we can either swirl the drain of depression on your small little island by yourself, or realize that there's someone else on the other side, but there's a big ocean between. And how do we cross? But what if you have one attainable step, and just take one attainable step at a time to really allow yourself to grow small little steps. When you look back later, you'd be surprised at where you end up.
Exactly. So Katrina, where could someone reach out to you if they want to either contribute some way to any of the foundations you're running, or even just reach out to you personally and get in touch with you?
Sure. You can contact me at katrina@healthybrain.ca is just an email address for me, or you can also go on to my website, which is healthybrain.ca. And, you can always give me a call as well. Love to talk to people because, we have so many things that sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. And you can call me there, 780-686-7949. And awesome. I'm up in Canada.
Well, thank you very much, Katrina. And, as we have talked, that I am a gratitude guy. And so I like to ask, what is something throughout your journey that, looking back in a different light, you would never have thought that I'm grateful for, but has really either filled you with gratitude, or you were happy that it helped you along in some little way?
Absolutely. Well, from someone who couldn't read, I am now a 5 times best-selling author.
Wow.
And I write on, the mental health of From Shadows to Light.
Nice. A whole human approach to mental health.
And looking at mental health areas, I also, like Chris, am involved with Blue Talks. I was in the very first Blue Talks, and I talked about rising through and crashing through your ceiling of limitations that you place on yourself. And in this one here on Heal, I talked about feeling functional failure from the frontline fatigue, and also writing on the neurological nutrition and mental health, and really understanding the choices that you have every single time you go to the grocery store to choose options for your own health journey as it transitions into your biochemistry. One little chance at a time, one little shop at a time, one meal at a time, one day at a time.
Exactly. All those little steps, all those little meals do add up. Now, are all those books located on your website?
A few of them are not. I don't believe all of them are, but you should be able to see some, and you can also get them on Amazon as well.
Yep. So in the show notes, we'll put a list of the books so people can reach out and find you on the written page.
Yeah.
So, Katrina, it's been a phenomenal experience to talk with you. I'm so excited to see what your speaking journey has in store for you, because you spoke so eloquently today. I greatly appreciate it. But I do have one more question. What is your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur by far is always going to be the T-Rex. And the reason I picked the T-Rex is because the T-Rex has the highest and largest brain and strongest level of cognitive focus and abilities to utilize it.
That's the first reason that I have heard that really talks about the brain function of T-Rex. People say, oh, he's BA and he's a boss and he goes after it. No one has ever talked about the cognitive abilities of T-Rex. So that's why Grimlock here is the leader of the Dinobots.
He has the
Everyone,
largest brain out of every
Yep.
dinosaur out there.
You hear that, buddy? You are smart. So yeah, people know that who've listened to the podcast know I have a lot of Transformers. I love my Transformers. I love Grimlock. So that's fun. So folks, please reach out to Katrina at healthybrain.ca. Find her books at Amazon and other places. Please use her resources to benefit your life. Also, if you want to learn more about the Attitude of Gratitude tag, which is my message, reach out to me at chrisdtgordon.com so we can help young people increase their gratitude, positivity, and resilience. Please like, share, subscribe to my channel, and share these messages out because they don't do any good if they're not heard or watched. So please share Katrina's message with people who might benefit from them. And let's just build a better tomorrow today. Well, folks, thank you very much, Katrina. And with that, folks, please have a great day. Thanks for joining us today. And remember to pass on perfection and go for greatness.